players are opting out. In the NFL, they have made this decision to opt out. Now the league is looking into changing the opt-out window. Apparently, they want to shrink it. Correct? That's the NFL's plan. They
Well,
want
yeah,
to shrink the
because
opt-out window.
the original word was they wanted to be 7 days after they decided upon the revised collective bargaining agreement, or CBA. The issue with that is right now they've agreed upon everything in principle. The problem is the language within some of the opt-outs, and that's what's taking so long. Is the NFL and the NFLPA attorneys are going back and forth trying to get how they're going to articulate some of these weird little nuanced circumstances. And I'll try to touch on some just so some people kind of understand some of the issues that some of these players are facing, and maybe even some of the reasons why some of these players are opting out. It's not all about COVID, folks. Hate to break that to you. It's a business decision right now.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I didn't look at this the right way, and I'll call myself out for it because I didn't look at this the right way. When I saw the list of players that opted out, and it's, some of these are good players, and it's not just the 8 guys that opted out from the New England Patriots and the conspiracy theories as to why you think that is. I assumed, and I'm almost positive one of our over-unders from a week ago was number of players that were going to opt out, and I think it was a low number, and both you and I took the under. Because I just thought, and this was me not even thinking about the financial ramifications or what the clauses on certain contracts or how this whole thing was done, but I looked at it like this. Man, of any sport and any player and any athlete that's willing to go in and play during a pandemic, football is one of them because those guys lay it on the line every single week. That game is about taking risks, and I view them, and I've always said this, the same as combat fighters, the same as boxers, MMA, combat athletes, all of those guys. Football players, they have a different mentality when they approach this because it's literally putting your body and your physical well-being on the line. So I just thought, man, what do they care about COVID? These are young, healthy individuals. And then I see the number of players that are opting out, and now the financial ramifications of it start to make more of an impact, as you alluded to.
Well, look. We got to start with this. Some players obviously have a previous history of battling, whether it's cancer or some of their illnesses, so they could have a compromised immune system. If that's the case, and even guys with asthma, they've elected to opt out. Michael Pierce, for example, who, of all the names, he's not one that I don't think is a household name for a lot of people. He plays D tackle. He just signed a 3-year deal with the Minnesota Vikings. He's decided to opt out. He's got asthma. And he just said it's not worth the risk for someone like me who obviously is going to be more apt to have worse symptoms, potentially even a hospitalization. And so it makes sense. And by the way, when you are more at risk based on your previous health history, you get $350,000 to opt out. Now that comes out of your future salary, and he's going to make plenty more than that. But you do get rewarded with more immediately when you are at risk. Now, what you're not factoring in right now is all the wives. The wives are going to have, or girlfriends, they're going to have a huge say to a lot of these players, especially if they have children too. And their children might be at risk, or the wife or the girlfriend might be at risk. So, or even a family member. I mean, we've heard different players talk about that. There's a college football player that opted out that's going to go play in the NFL when he gets drafted next year. And he's already lost one parent. He said, I don't want to potentially lose another due to COVID, and I want to be able to see them. So, there's different reasons for it from a personal standpoint and health standpoint.
For sure.
Here's why, though, it's a business decision now. Because they've already reported to training camp. They had to go to training camp, take your COVID test. There's 2 rounds of it. You quarantine during that period in time. This is back on the 28th. We're talking 5 days ago. Like, if it was about health, whether it was about you or any of your loved ones or those around you, you would have went in, took it, said, look, I'm either at risk or I've got someone else who is. I'm opting out. If you're waiting and now you're still trying to decide, it's become a business decision because you're waiting longer and longer to see what the language is going to be within the revised CBA and what's it going to say in there about my potential future earnings, or what's it going to say in regards to opt-outs. So here, I'll explain very quickly, basically what's at stake. So here's how it works. If you opt out, you get a minimum of $150,000 now, and then anything else that you made this year and kept. So there's signing bonuses for a new contract, roster bonuses, workout bonuses, potentially, if that was even worked in there based on the Zoom meetings and so forth. All those things are potentially there for you, okay? But your base salary is not. Now, even if it's guaranteed, which I'll get into, that's still not necessarily guaranteed. There's a caveat to that, okay? So if you opt out, you either get 150,000 and anything else you've made, or 350 if you're at risk. So let's say you decide to play this year, okay? And once you get past that deadline, there's no going back, okay? So once you make that decision, you're in, and you got to stay and you got to play and you got to actually, put it all on the line. Here's the issue. If they stop the season or postpone the season, you only get a prorated amount, meaning however many games you play. If you played 4 games, you get 25% of what you're going to make, right? To play 16, 4 of 16 is 25%. That's it. The other 12 games you're going to get paid for goes bye-bye. It goes away. You are not entitled to that money. So that's why these guys who opt out, who have 1 year left on their deal or signed a 1-year deal, not only are they subject to get cut, especially with no preseason, no offseason, they're looking at it and saying, I don't even know if I'm in the best shape to make this team right now. Why not toll my contract to next year, and then I'll wait then to figure it out. So then there's that caveat I talked about guaranteed monies or in like a base salary. So let's say, for example, Jonas, you were playing, you're making $16 million in base salary.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say you wouldn't be doing this show, that's for sure. But let's say that's the case, and we play 4 games, they shut down the season. So you make your $4 million in base salary and whatever else you've made, but you get that other $12 million. You negotiate in a contract, it's guaranteed. You're like, all right, that's guaranteed to me now too. That gets pushed off. That $12 million goes into the ether and gets pushed off to a later year in your contract where you don't have those guaranteed monies. So let's say you've got $12 million in a base salary 2 years from now. That wasn't guaranteed. Well, it turns into being guaranteed now. But the problem is you obviously had a salary at some point, and who knows whether or not you would have made it or not, but you literally lost that $12 million that you would have made this year that you thought was guaranteed. So that's the risk that some of the bigger money contracts are taking. And for a lot of the guys with 1-year contracts, this is where it comes into play. If you go play, and let's say you had guarantees within, right? Or you're on the opening day roster and then, your salary is guaranteed for the rest of the year. Well, if you're on a 1-year deal, Jonas, if you don't have a contract signed for next year and the season gets stopped after 4 games, that money doesn't move to another year. You have to be able to sign another contract in order to be able to tap into that. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So a lot of the guys you see right now that are opting out, they've got 1-year deals. And the reason is it's too big of a risk in case the season gets shut down that they're not going to be able to make any of that money.
Do you blame them? The guys that are looking at this financially, the guys on those 1-year deals, do you blame them for doing it? Because the way that you break it down,
at all.
I agree.
Not at all.
Agree.
And I don't blame them for it. And I also think I wish more were upfront about it and said, look, like people are like, well, why didn't not a ton of baseball players did it? You don't know why? Because they weren't incentivized to.
Yeah.
Like other leagues did incentivize the players not to do it. The NFL has kind of done that, and that's why I think you had 38 and maybe a couple more did today. But that's why you're going to see more guys do it if you're going to incentivize them to do it.
This is one of those situations where everybody's got to do what's best for them. And that's not just from a physical or a health standpoint, but from a finance standpoint. And if these guys look at this like, hey, man, it's more beneficial to me to sit out, toll the contract over a year, and come back in better shape, better prepared, whatever, for a better opportunity next season, then that's what they got to do. I don't hold it against those guys. It makes all the sense in the world. And I also... there are legitimate health risks that you talk about. Like, the obesity is apparently one of the main factors that's really, as far as COVID, what it attacks. If you're obese and that's an underlying health issue, that's going to be one of those things that it attacks. I think, is it Goodwin from the 49ers? Used to play for the 49ers. Him and his wife had it plays for the Eagles now. Him and his wife had 3 miscarriages.
Right.
They just were able to successfully have a child. He doesn't, he's not taking any chances. I get it. I totally get it. And if you watched any of their documentary, it's terrible. It's heartbreaking just what that does to you psychologically. So this is one of those things. It's a strange time in a strange year. Guys have got money worries and other guys have health worries, and I have no issue with either one of them. I just don't.
No, I don't have any issue with either one, and they're probably not going to be upfront about the ones that are more financial in nature, but here's the scuttlebutt now between the NFL and the NFLPA, and players have spoken out about it. The NFL wants to say, all right, we don't want to keep that window as long because it puts the teams in a bad spot. If there ends up being a mass exodus again, like we saw from the Patriots, and it happens in the next few days, it's harder and harder for that team to be able to get guys to sign up on their roster, especially as they're trying to cut down to 80 players to go into camp. So That's why you're seeing the NFL kind of push back and be like, look, if you guys should have made your decision by now, because the old deadline would have been about today as it is. So, bottom line is no one's blaming them for the decision that they make, but let's be open and honest about the decision that we are making.